All right. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are doing great. I'm going to give this just a few minutes to log in and get set up. That looks good. So if you're just joining us you're watching live or waiting for people to come in, if you're watching this on the rewatch, just go ahead and do hashtag rewatch so I know when you've made a comment to come in and answer any questions you have. Hey, Regina, welcome, welcome. Sometimes I joke that it's going to be like the ones of you that are here with me. We're just going to give people a minute to log on. We've got an interesting topic today, actually one that I feel like I had trouble talking about. Not maybe emotional trouble, but just trouble because the topic itself is too personal. We're talking about being big-hearted in business, and if you have ever had the struggle of being a person with a big heart and you're trying to run your business and it leads to burnout. If you guys are on here, if you're watching the rewatch, just hashtag rewatch so that I know that you came in later. And if you're here live with us, the best thing you can do to support, to make sure people know you're here, is to drop some emojis, let me know that you're listening, especially since I can't really see you. Anything you guys can do to comment. If you're there now, just drop a comment, let me know you're here so that I can call out some of you by name, because I know that the people in this room are really great at having some of these same experiences. So first we'll start with a couple announcements. First biggest announcement, this is new. Nobody has heard about this yet. If you're on this call and you are a photographer, this is specifically for our photographer group. We are going to do a workshop. It's going to be live the week of March 22nd to 26th. Every day during lunch we're going to be live. And during that workshop time, it's only $49 for the week. It is, again, March 22nd to the 26th, $49 for the week, every day at lunch from 12 to 1:30. Monday, we're talking about going from digitally inclusive to in-person sales. Tuesday, we're talking about how to do a sales meeting in a client's home or on Zoom. Wednesday, we're talking about having a mindset to change, so what changes you need to make. Thursday, we're talking about sales psychology and some of the rules of how to do a sales process. And the last thing is what to do first, next, and after that. So just kind of getting you guys set up. So if you're in this group and you're a photographer, this is specifically teaching for you. This is the week of March 22nd to the 26th. I'll put out some information about how you guys can sign up. Again, $49 for the entire week. Getting into some of my biggest topics, I felt like this was probably the best way to deliver it to you guys. So stay tuned for that information. Hello, Danielle, and hello, Annie. So today we're going to talk about having boundaries and having a big heart. So, Lori, I'm glad you're here. Lori, I told you this one's for you. This one's for Lori today. So I'm going to call you out a little bit, Lori, since we're in a smaller group. Lori was my daughter's preschool owner of her preschool, and she's since gone on to open up other preschools in the area. She is absolutely incredible, and you can imagine that is a type of job where having a heart is incredibly important. In fact, I would venture to say most people in our group have those types of jobs, right? Realtors, hairstylists, photographers, coaches, teachers. These are all very caring-based professions, things where who you are is just as much as the product itself. And so I was talking about Lori, and Lori runs these preschools, and I imagine that is a job that you have to show up for every single day with a ginormous heart for the kids. Now she does have to deal with the parents, which I know for a fact she also loves, but I imagine that's where the boundaries have to come in as well. So, in that case, it might be the case from a lot of us. Let's say you have a client who is dropping their kid off, but they haven't paid their tuition payment, and now there's a couple weeks behind or a month behind, and they're dealing with things personally, but nobody's paying their bill, and now you're in this really uncomfortable situation where you're a friend and they know you run the business, and at the same time you're trying to figure out, like, how do I communicate that this isn't friendship, this is business, I really need you to pay your bill, and then to take it that next step, which is not just okay, I'm really super serious, you need to pay this, but now your child cannot come in today. And I can imagine as being a preschool director, it's hard. You've got to have a conversation that you don't even want to have in front of a child just because you're so sensitive to how they're feeling. And I know Lori enough to know that she would never do that. And then at the same time, you're feeling like, man, I want to continue to have a good relationship with this person, but this thing has gotten in the way. So I wanted to talk to you guys. And initially, this is what I was going to talk about because it's an actual person and it's not a business thing. I have had in my life a pattern of having friendships that would last like amazing for maybe a year, and then a number of things would start to add up, and it was things that I never corrected or I never said was bothering me, and all of a sudden we just kind of fizzle apart. And it's not because I didn't like that person anymore. It's just because things had accumulated to a point where I was no longer saying, what was really bothering me. And I think of one particular instance. So I had a friend in high school, my very best friend in high school. We were friends for maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And she had muscular dystrophy, and she was a great friend. That really wasn't part of the friendship. But as her condition started to deteriorate and as I became a closer and closer friend, teachers at my high school were using me as if I was her care support person. And that started to cross this line between we were friends and we'd hang out on the weekends, but now if there's a fire drill, I'm suddenly the person that's responsible for getting you out of the building. Or if there's a thing where we're all sitting on the ground, then I've got to be the one to lift down and pick you up. And that was, let's be clear, that's something that I asked to do. So let's not say that this was put upon me. This was probably, if I remember back, most likely this was me seeing a need and just jumping in to meet it before realizing like, wow, this has been going on a while and I feel like our relationship is struggling because of it. And our relationship did struggle because of it, because I started to take ownership of things that I shouldn't take ownership of. Like, let's say, for example, she was late getting to a class, then I would be mad because I'd done all the steps to get her to class on time and she still didn't show up on time. Or, I would have to like go to her lunchroom and pick up her lunch for her today, and then she wouldn't like what I brought her back, which is probably valid because she like ate vegetables and I was like, here, have some pasta. But okay, so that was valid. But you can imagine and throw up some likes or some hearts if this has ever been you in a friendship, just not even business, just in a friendship or in a life point of view where just you're really close to someone, but things start happening and your boundaries start getting encroached upon. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. And then when it does happen, you think, oh my gosh, I haven't said anything up to this point, so I certainly can't say something now. That has caused the ruin of many friendships throughout my life. Hey, Gail, many friendships throughout my life have followed that pattern of me seeing a need, jumping in to meet it, having a great relationship with somebody, giving and giving and giving because it felt good, because it was how I got my validation, because I wanted her to like me, and because deep down I felt like that's what people required from me. And then getting to the point where like, well, I'm serving and I'm serving and I'm serving and I'm serving, and I'm not getting enough back, or now you're expecting this of me, or now there's no joy for this left in me. And in friendships, you just end a friendship. Well, what happens in business? What happens in business when you just say yes to everything that comes your way? Yes, I can serve at that charity event. Yes, I'll do those portraits for those kids who have cancer. Yes, I will help you raise money. Yes, I will be on this committee. Yes, I'll go to that networking event. And you just say yes after yes after yes after yes, because we are loving, caring people, right? We get our validation from people enjoying us taking care of them. And we could spend hours dissecting that, because this is something that I definitely really struggle with myself. And to be really honest, the only reason I have perspective on it now that I didn't before is because I've been going to coaching and working with a coach and tackling these worldviews that I've just kind of assumed were part of who I am, but were actually things that were holding me back. So in my personal life, I've struggled with this, but in business over the last 4, 5, 6 years, I've gotten really concrete on this. So the point of that story is to think about how you interact with people on a personal level probably tells you how you're handling things in a professional world. So the things that burn you out in your personal life are probably also the things that are going to be the traps that you fall into in your business life. And having a big heart, hear me on this, I am not asking you to trade in your heart. I am not saying that you can't be empathetic, that you can't give when you want to give, that you can't say yes when you want to say yes. What I am suggesting is if you are the type of person who throughout your life has overcommitted or has been a people pleaser, or has been somebody that seeks validation by people saying thank you for the things that you've thought of, or like me, I take great pride in anticipating what someone's need is before they even have it, because that to me is the best feeling in the world when I have, when I could just be like, oh, here's your thing that you forgot and I remembered it for you. And in business, that makes me incredibly successful. It means I can empathize with clients. I can feel what they're going to feel. I can connect with them. The love is big and it's deep and I'm not scared to show it. I love to take care of people. And so those are things I've worked into my business. That said, it is also every time I felt like I was going to burn out, it was because I had overstepped my own boundaries. It's because I had allowed myself to give to the point that there was no way the other person could ever fill that back in. There was no amount of gratitude. There was no amount of thanks or service or referrals or whatever that would make it worth it. So I want to tell you guys about my hardest client. My hardest client, and I think every week I say this is my hardest client, but this is really my hardest client. My hardest client was just maybe a week ago, and this client is VIP. This client is the most important client that I have. This relationship should go on years if it continues to grow, which I imagine it will. She's also incredibly demanding, this client. So she has needs. When she wants what she wants, she speaks up and she tells me that she wants it. And I am frequently in the position of having to say no. And it's very uncomfortable because it's almost like she can feel when I'm wavering. It's like she can feel when I'm giving up. And then she can, grab the higher ground away from me. And in this case, this client wanted something that's just absolutely a no-go for me. It's just absolutely against the rules. And I had to tell her no. But before I did say no, I was just really uncomfortable with it. And then this client did something really weird. She actually climbed in my lap. Okay, she climbed in my lap and she put her arms around my neck and she said, "Are you sure? Are you sure I can't have a popsicle? Because this client is Cece, and this client is my daughter, and this client is 7 years old, and she is very much my most difficult client, and she is very much the one that I have to set boundaries with the most." So every day, every other day, I feel like we have to have this conversation where Cece is asking me for a popsicle. She's always wanting popsicles before dinner. It's a very specific kind of popsicle she wants before dinner. And the answer is always no. I don't know why she continues to ask. Maybe sometimes her dad says yes. She just continues to ask. And this is a rule in our house. This is a boundary in our house. And it's not hard for me to tell her no because I've had a tremendous amount of practice. It's also not hard for me to say no because I am detached from the outcome. I don't care how upset she gets. Danielle said she was wondering which kind of client was going to climb in my lap. See what I did to you there? I just gave you an extra sauce on that. If you guys are enjoying this, likes, hearts, smiles, and comments help people know that this is actually valuable content. So that would help me out. Okay. So why is it easier for us to say no to our children than it is to say no in business. Why is it easier for us to say no to our children when it is not as easy for us to say no in business? Especially for my people pleasers, especially for my big-hearted people who want to give everything. Why is it so easy? Well, it's easy because I've had practice every day. It's easier because I'm detached from the outcome. I know that Cece is going to love me no matter what, so this popsicle thing is just going to blow over. I don't think she's going to write on her college applications, how traumatic it was. Where did I go? There I am. I don't think she's going to write on her college applications how traumatic it was that I wouldn't give her popsicles. Okay? So I'm detached from the outcome. Basically, my answer is okay, cry about it. I don't care. And sometimes I say that, and sometimes I just think it oh, okay, you think you're running a new game on me today. No, the answer is still no. The other reason why it's easier for me to say no to a child than it is to say no to a client, it's easy for me to say no to Cece because I know the rules. The rules are the rules. She knows the rules. I know the rules. These are not new rules. This is not me arbitrarily making up a rule. This is a rule that has been established in our family for forever. None of my rules are arbitrary. So this is not just a rule for the sake of having a rule. As a parent and as an employer, I try to say yes as much as I can. If I can say yes, everybody is happier. If I can say yes without hurting myself, the answer is always going to be yes. So I didn't have any arbitrary rules. The next is I have examples to copy. So I had amazing parents. Mom is probably watching this or watching this later. This is your big moment. I had amazing parents. I had phenomenal examples of how to set boundaries with children. I had great examples from Cece's teachers, honestly, who have helped so much. Thank you, Lori Singh. I have had great examples from television, from books, from fellow moms. And so I have a lot of examples in life of how to be a great parent. I don't have that same insight into how to be a great business owner because we're so much more private about what it takes to run a successful business. Okay, the other reason it's easier for me to say yes to Cece than it is for me to say it in business is because I can see the big picture. I can see the big picture with Cece. So I know that I don't want to raise a little asshole. Amen. Hearts and smiles if you too don't want to raise a little asshole. Yes, I pretty much think that that is my first job as a parent. 1, to keep her alive. 2, to keep her from turning into an asshole. And the way that I do that is I teach her that when I say no, no means no, and I'm not going to backtrack on it. Otherwise, you get a little litigator, right, who just wants to re-legislate every decision that you've made. So I see the big picture. I know how I want this to end up. I'm not so upset about this one thing that's happening because I want to see who she's going to become. These last two are super important. The second to last one is trust. She trusts me. I have her trust. I have her trust because I birthed her and I keep her alive every day and I feed her. So in those ways, I have her trust. She also knows that my only goal is to keep her safe and to take care of her. And so she knows that when I'm enforcing a rule deep down, that that's really what I'm doing. And this one is, I think, the most important one. I am able to say no to Cece because I want to have a great relationship with her. If you want to have a great relationship with your business, it's the same thing. So let's reverse all of these. And if you're my note taker, we are going to now make a list. So get pumped up. Let me pull my list up over here. So while I am doing that, just so you guys know, every 2 weeks we tackle a new topic. If you're just joining us, the topic that we are tackling this week is being big-hearted with boundaries. Boundaries as a way to prevent yourself from burning out or getting overextended. We're talking about how we as parents can be so comfortable saying no to things, especially when it's popsicles. But it's really much more difficult sometimes for some of us in business. By the way, one of the reasons I say no to popsicles is because one day the fight won't be about popsicles, right? And some of my older parents in here, I won't call you out, but I know you're in here. Some of my older parents in here, parents of older children, let me clarify, you are not old parents. You are parents of older children. You understand when I say sometimes the fight won't be about popsicles. So I have to learn how to win those fights now and establish those boundaries now, so that one day when the fight is going, it's if it's bigger than popsicles, it's okay. Okay, so boundaries prevent burnout. Write this at the top of your paper if you are taking notes. Boundaries prevent burnout. Sips Mountain Dew. Hold on. Y'all ever have a soda that just like puts you in a good place? For me, that's always Diet Mountain Dew. Like, whew, that's the good stuff. Okay, back on task. So I was able to say no to Cece. You as a parent, as a person who has watched children, as somebody who's taught or been in a classroom or had cousins or nieces or nephew, you've put a kid to bed, right? I hate when people say right, and now I'm doing it. Let me refocus. You put your children in bed. I'm sure there's fights about it. You require them to do homework. I'm sure you've had to legislate fights about it. You've had to say no to treats before dinner. You've had to turn down somebody who wanted a second date when you didn't want a second date. Some of us have a lot of experience getting turned down. I'm just kidding. I wanted to say like, oh, I've got experience being the one that turns them down for second dates, but that's not true. One of these days I'm going to teach one of these classes, and I am going to find a way to incorporate my worst ex-boyfriend. And I'm really on a tangent here, but I promise you this is worth it, because when I tell you that one day, this is when Instant Messenger was hot. Boop, boop. This ex-boyfriend texted me that he was writing a book, like, oh, okay, about guerrilla warfare. Okay. And he spelled it Gorilla, guerrilla warfare. And what's shocking is that's not what made us break up. It wasn't the idea that he thought he was writing a book about guerrilla, Guerilla, guerrilla warfare. We broke up when he told me that he wanted to be in swiftwater rescue, but he could not swim. Okay. So I'm gonna find a way to incorporate that somehow. I don't have a clue actually how. And I have no idea why I have no idea why I just took you on that journey. It is probably those 4 sips of Diet Mountain Dew. So thank you very much. Okay, so it's easier for us to say no to people that we are comfortable with. It's harder to do it in business. But I am here to tell you, if you want to have an existing, long-term, non-burnt out, using your heart, enjoying your job, falling back in love with the thing that you got into your business for in the first place. By the way, you didn't start your business being like, you know what I hate doing? I'm going to make that my job, right? You started your job because you loved it. And hopefully, to keep you to still loving it, we're going to talk about how to build these boundaries around you. Okay, so first of all, practice. So we're talking about boundaries. First, when would you be using boundaries in business? Boundaries are when people are trying to push you past the rules that you have set up for yourself or your value system. So as a business, I encourage you to have a really concrete understanding of both of those things. And if you hadn't, you probably should just block out 30 minutes on your calendar every morning for a week to really iron these things out. I don't suggest sitting down and trying to crank them all out in one day. I think it's something that you have to kind of process over time, give yourself time to edit. But what are your values as a business? Those values no doubt line up also with who you are as a person. And what are your rules as a business? I can't tell you what the rules for your business have to be. I can tell you about the rules of business for photography. Like, I have a rule that I won't post on Instagram as the first way a client has seen an image. That's just a way of doing things. So if a client reaches out to me and says, why haven't you posted a sneak peek from my session? I can say, well, I don't actually post any sneak peeks from a session because I don't want the first way you see your images to be in a 2-inch square on your phone. So you have to have rules for common things that come up in your business, and you have to have a reasoning behind them that's not arbitrary. It's not because that's how I do it, or because I don't. That's the equivalent of saying because I said so. Because I said so is not a sufficient answer for most of your children, especially if they're viewing the rule as arbitrary. So to get that trust, you have to have a reason behind your rules and your boundaries in your business. As a pointer on how to start thinking about what those could be, I know that this is something you will develop over time, but just to start with, think about the client conflicts that you've had or the uncomfortable situations you've faced. Maybe it's responding to a lead. Maybe it's someone wants something for you that you should be charging for. Maybe it's people are canceling on you and you're not charging your rescheduling fee. Whatever it is, get really clear on what your rules and your boundaries are. Write them down. Same thing for your values. Your values are the foundational pieces of who you are. This should not be a list of 10 different things. This should be like 3 to 5. So what are your 3 to 5 values as a business? One of mine that you guys will hear us talk about that I actually took from a photographer I very much admire is we have a thrilled to tears guarantee. That is my summation of the idea that no matter what, whatever it takes to make a client's experience so that the conclusion of it is that they are thrilled is the right thing for me to do. So in that value system, first of all, I charge to be able to do that luxury. So if I wasn't charging enough, I couldn't honor this. So that's part of it. But the way that I can honor this is, by the way, when I sell you a piece of artwork, I can say to you, hey, if anything ever happens to this artwork, if you ever have water damage, if it's ever damaged in a move, I want you to call me. I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to replace it for you for free. Thrilled to tears means if I've offered a suggestion for you on what sizes I think is appropriate for your space, if you get it home and don't love it and wish you went a size larger, then I am going to take that piece down and I'm going to replace it with the right size and just charge you the difference. So you have to have the boundaries that you've ironed out in advance with good intention to understand how to address every situation. If you are feeling burnt out in your business, it is because you have not taken care of your boundaries. So if you are making my notes, and Danielle, you're usually my gold star note taker. So Danielle, this is for you. If you're feeling burnt out in your business, it's because you haven't asserted your boundaries. Boundaries being rules and value system, the box that you put around yourself that says we do not go past this point. So that leads to burnout. How? How does that lead to burnout? That leads to burnout because every time someone asks me a question, I have to answer it. And if I can answer it from a place of rules that I already have and guidelines that I always follow, I don't have to do the research. And you know what I'm talking about with the research. The research is like, oh, okay, well, who did this referral come from? Okay, well, I told her that I would do it this way, so I better do it the same way for her. This is the friend. And now you're doing all this extra thought and you're making a set of rules that applies to this person but not to this person. It's a mess and you're having to do all this research, and then every time someone tells you something that they say you did, you have to think back to yourself, did I make that exception? Did I say that? Well, I'm not sure, so I better go with it. No, you're going to be exhausted. And just like my friendships, plural, over the years that would fizzle out and fall apart, it's because something was bothering me that I never said, like, hey, that really bothers me. Here's a boundary that I want to have. And that was me hurting our relationship by not telling somebody when I had a boundary. That was my fault. If you are feeling burnt out in your business, the problem is not your customers. Oh shit. If if the problem is not your customers. The problem's not your customers. If you're burnout, if you're tired, it's not they won't pay and they can't schedule and they keep coming to me with requests and this and this and this. The problem is not your customers. The problem is you not asserting your boundaries. Boom. So let's talk about how to do that. Practice. I thought, this is number one on how boundaries prevent burnout. Number one, practice. I really felt like in early business that the troubles that I would have to survive, I wouldn't have to deal with later on. So I felt like in early business, and you guys know this, early business is always the most difficult. Everything you're making, you're inventing for the first time. And so I really thought like, well, once I get over these hiccups, I won't have to deal with reminding people to make their invoice payment, or I won't have to deal with people who are trying to take photographs over my shoulder during a session. I just won't have to deal with this nonsense of people telling me that I should come shoot an event for free for my portfolio. That happened an hour ago. Okay, so I'm not really like 100% over it. Hold on, sips, drink. But we're not going to go there. I'll save it for a few weeks. Okay, so I thought those problems would end in my first year. The truth is, and this is what sucks, the truth is they're consistently the same exact types of questions. I am still having to enforce many of the same boundaries that I first struggled with to do in the beginning part of my business. So the struggles aren't different, but because I've had practice, I'm so much better equipped to handle them. So it doesn't stress me out. What used to would have paralyzed me and then pissed me off and influenced our entire relationship, if somebody, let's use the example of a parent taking a photograph over my shoulder while their child's having a session. I understand why people wouldn't know that that's not something you should do, or why that instinct to like take a picture while someone's taking a picture because it looks so good and it's your kid and look at the light and oh my God, and you want to have a photograph even if I'm in it taking the photos, you're documenting. I get why it happens. It doesn't make it okay for me. That's a boundary for me, because if I found the location and I've staged a light and I've made the shot, then don't steal it over my shoulder. I understand why people don't understand that. I have had to enforce that boundary my entire business. It used to stress me out where I couldn't even make the words come out of my mouth. I could not formulate the phrase like, please stop taking pictures over my shoulder, right? And now I see it's something I still have to say. It just doesn't stress me out because I've had practice. So that's when I say, like with Cece with the popsicles, it doesn't stress me out because I've had a lot of practice saying no to popsicles. And I know one day the question's not going to be about popsicles, so I might as well get my practice in now. So practice. If it sucks now, it's only going to get easier. So when you go to assert boundaries for the first time and it feels clumsy and awful, like you don't have a clue what you're doing, it's okay. It gets better. It gets easier. The battles are the same, but you will have more practice. Okay, this next one is super critical. This is where most people mess it up. And again, I have been in coaching for a year to be able to fix this. So detach yourself from what the client will think or say about you. Oh, I'm going to repeat it because I feel like I'm in church. That's church. I don't know if y'all all go to church, but we have in business church today. Okay, business church today. Detach yourself from what the client will think or say about you. Ooh. Michelle said she needed to hear this. Kelly said, oh my God, I've done that. You should write a blog post about how parents should not do that. See, Kelly, by the way, does amazing portrait sessions with her daughter all the time. Well, I say all the time because it seems like it, but all the time. And she is very conscious. She's in our group. She's very conscious of protecting photographers and copyright. She's actually one of the most conscientious clients I've ever had. And she still does not know that you don't take photographs behind a session. So many times we have intentions and you just don't know that it's something you shouldn't do. And what's going to hurt a relationship is if I don't communicate, hey girl, easy on the camera, which by the way is the first way I say it now. Easy girl. Okay. Detach yourself from what the client will think or say about you. I don't care what Cece will think or say about me. to her little runny-nosed friends because I don't give her a popsicle. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if she tells her teacher. I don't care if she cries about it to her pillow. I don't care if she tells me. I do not care. I don't care. I do not care. I am not invested in how upset she is about not getting a popsicle. It's easy for me to say that because I know she's going to love me no matter what. So that's the piece that's missing with clients, isn't it? That's the piece that we find the most difficult. It's because with Cece, I know she's going to love me no matter what. With a client or a customer where you're trying to stay in a good relationship with them, you feel very invested in what they're going to think or say about you. And you do have to think about that to a degree. But what you don't have to do is make your decision based around how somebody else is going to react, because you have no control over how someone sees you or how they feel about you. You have no control over it. I know somebody in their head right now just wrote that down and said, that sounds good, but I'll deal with that later, because that thought can unlock months of therapy. I'm not joking. When I say I've been in counseling for like a year over this, I'm serious. That one thought will screw you all kinds of up because you can't control how other people see you. You cannot control it. I very much want y'all to like me. I want everybody in here to like me, to think I'm funny, to think I look real good today because I did my makeup. I want that. I want that. But I cannot control it. I can't control if you think that I am all those things or not. I can only show up and be myself and say this is who I am. So for you in business, you have to detach yourself from what somebody's going to say about you or what they are going to feel about you. It's none of your business, and you have no control over it. So if you are asserting boundaries and values, those things are absolutely okay things. Having values and building boundaries around them, having rules and guidelines as a business and building boundaries around them is an okay thing to do. It is not going to hurt anybody of reasonable sanity. So if it does impact your relationship, it's because that person is pissed off that they can't get from you what they want. And that is not your problem or your responsibility. Okay, I could go on that all day, but I might need to like just mess y'all up a little bit. Like just star that one thought and think about it, especially my people pleasers. You have to detach yourself from what other people will think or say about you because you have no control over it. All right, that's like 3 months right there. That's 3 months of counseling I just gave all of y'all. Okay. So to do that, number 3, you have to make sure you're clear on what your boundaries and your guidelines are. We talked about this a minute ago. We're not going to dive into it too much more. If you don't know what they are, how the hell am I supposed to know? If you've never had a conversation with your client about how they shouldn't take photographs over your shoulder during a session, how can you expect them to know that? I'm seeing clients on here, by the way, who are saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Clearly it didn't bother me, or I didn't know, or I didn't think to tell you, because I know all of you people would never do that. So detach yourself from what they think about you. And when you have boundaries and your guidelines, make sure you are clear on what they are. If the same problems are coming up over and over and over and over again, you are messing up some piece of the communication. So if your kid is consistently, like what would be a good one? I don't know, like picking their nose, right? Okay. Don't ask why this is a hot button issue in my family. Okay. So your kid's like consistently picking their nose and you're like, stop picking your nose, that's gross. And they're like, oh, but I just want to live with my finger up my nose. And you're like, no, stop picking your nose, that's gross. And you keep having this same problem over and over again. If you've never told your kid like, hey, picking your nose is gross, you can't be upset when they walk around with a finger up their nose, right? Because that's just where it belongs. It's a handy little holder, it's the right size, it's just kids and noses, they find it. This is especially for Lori. Okay, so assert your boundaries, but be clear on what they are first. If you're not clear, nobody else is clear. The next one is make sure your boundaries make sense. Your boundaries have to make sense. So, can you have a boundary that you only work 1 day a week? Well, absolutely. Absolutely. You can have a boundary that says, I only work 1 day a week. This is the only day I accept phone calls. This is the only day I'm available, 1 day a week. If that's your boundary, you have to communicate it because it is not what people find reasonable, customary, normal. It's not what most people would expect. So if you don't tell people about those stray things that are you specific and maybe not something they've heard before, you have to make sure they know about it. Or when you go to enforce it, it's going to feel punitive, it's going to feel arbitrary, it's going to feel very hurtful. So I've got wonderful clients on here. I'm going to pick on Sarah for a second. Sarah, fabulous client. She's done multiple sessions with us, always for her kids, always super amazing client, very conscientious, has now confessed to having taken portraits over my shoulder at some point. And that rule, if we were in the middle of a session and we've built a great relationship, and I've never told Sarah that that's the rule, if she's taking pictures over my shoulder and I whirl around at her and I say, what are you doing? You can't take pictures while I'm taking pictures. She feels, 1, terrible, 2, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And then perhaps a little later, she's going to think to herself, well, that was kind of messed up. I didn't know that was a rule. She didn't have to snap at me like that, right? And now our relationship is impacted. That rule, because it's something she hadn't heard before, and if I just suddenly kicked into enforcing it, would feel very arbitrary. So if you're having issues with your clients responding to your boundaries, make sure that they've understood them from the beginning. And if you need to, explain why those boundaries exist. Briefly explain. Not, you can't have a popsicle before dinner because that's going to teach you to always have popsicles before dinner, and I want you to eat more than French fries at college. Like, too much explanation. Just say, no, we don't eat treats before dinner. Okay? Quick explanation. So make sure your boundaries make sense. Next, have a professional mentor or industry partner you can turn to help you navigate these kinds of situations or situations you haven't encountered before. So I have a business with photography. Many of you are solopreneurs, right? You're the only person in your business who is doing your particular job. On any given day, it is just you. And that can make enforcing boundaries actually feel much more difficult because it's a one-on-one exchange and you don't feel like you have the army behind you saying, yeah, stick with your boundaries, you can do it. So when you need to, reach out to somebody about how to enforce a boundary when you haven't dealt with it before. So let's say we were talking earlier about Lori who owns a preschool. Let's say she has a family come in and they can't afford to pay. And Lori wants to be compassionate and she cares very much about them. She's going to go to them and say, okay, well, this is the rule and this is what I can do for you and how does this work for you? And let's say they come back to her and they say, we don't even owe you any money. What are you talking about? This is crazy. Why would you do this? And Lori's like, wait, I thought we were at least in agreement that you owed the money, but now we're not even in agreement you owe the money. What is this? Like, what is this situation? It would be beneficial for Lori to reach out to a fellow school owner, to a fellow professional and say, hey, what do you do when they don't even understand they owe money? How do you even address that? So reach out to a professional or an industry partner, especially if you feel like you're all by yourself. We want to help others, right? Oh, there's me saying right again. We want to help others. We want to be of service. People love to help. If you ask someone for help, they will absolutely give it to you. They're going to want to help you navigate a tough situation. And if they don't, like, they're just probably assholes. What are you doing? Hanging out with assholes. All right. Number 6, see the big picture. Does saying no to this client move you closer to your longer term goals? Does establishing this boundary help you long-term build the thing you're trying to build? Or is it keeping you small or holding you back? Stagnant is in itself a problem in business. So we don't even like stagnant if it's keeping you from growing and trying to achieve the things that you've wanted. So see the larger picture. This is really difficult with clients and it's not as difficult with kids because with kids, we know we're stuck with them for 18 years, right? So if I make an asshole now, like it's going to be big asshole in 10 years. So I got to do the work now so it's not an asshole in 10 years. Same exact thing in business. You have to see the larger picture beyond just this one transaction, because it is just the one situation. It's the one person. It's the one distraction that you're dealing with. This is not going to keep happening over and over and over again. And if it is, you probably need to think about your communication. But see it from the larger perspective. See it from 5 years, 5 minutes, 5 days from that moment. The worst client conversations I've had, yes, I can still remember them, but I am not upset by them because I saw the larger picture. Okay. You guys doing good? Woo. Oh, I want to read this from Kelly real quick. And then I'm going to give you the last two, because the last two are really the big ones. So Kelly says, Kelly, by the way, Kelly could probably chime in better than I could on this. She works with a profit that helps with people with intellectual disabilities, differently abled people. I know examples of where she's helped people find work, or at least a more stable situation. She does a lot of advocacy. I believe that is roughly a good summary of Kelly. So she said she once let a client rock her confidence and nearly knocked her off her game for half a year. They were upset because they wanted me to do something that went against my values. Oh, yes. I one time had a client that knocked me off my game. Actually, it was 2 back to back. And I can actually look at my revenue report from that year, and it just tanked. And then I found antidepressants. Okay. So, pro tip, that might help. But also, not having those boundaries and asserting those boundaries, it can really rock you, especially when you're being forced to assert boundaries that are really difficult to maintain, and you're having to exert the energy to maintain them. Because, by the way, it is so much easier to say yes. It is easy to give in. It is easy to concede. It is difficult to hold your ground. But it will put you in a better place long term. And by the way, if someone wants to break your boundaries once, they're going to keep stomping on them. And that's in relationships. That's on life right there. Okay. Y'all, I'm so wound up today. Can you imagine if you were actually here with me? I can't. I'm hot. Ugh. Okay. The last two big ones. Boundaries with your clients will build trust. When boundaries are clear, everybody knows what happens next. So I had a job working at a summer camp. And it was awesome. It was a great job. I love the kids. I love the people I was working with. All around amazing job. And while I might have had my differences on occasion with my boss, one thing that I loved about this boss was in summer camp, you can imagine there's a ton of parent feedback, we will call it, especially about our carpool process, which was pissing everybody off. So we were getting constant calls about this one particular issue, and I was the head of this one office that would receive all the calls, and so I had to deal with the parents. And eventually, sometimes it would get to a place where, the concession they were asking for, I couldn't give, or I couldn't do, or I couldn't meet, and it would go up to my boss, and it would be a case of, is my boss going to back me up and enforce this rule she's asked me to enforce, or is she going to concede? So have you ever had a boss like that where, you are being asked to enforce a rule, and that person gets so pissed off, and you just really hold the line for your company, and you're holding the line, and they just say, basically, I want to speak to the manager. The manager gets on the phone, and they just give them everything they want. It's the worst feeling in the world. So the reason I stayed at this job, that was a very difficult job, is because my boss always had my back. Always. She never conceded. If it was a rule she asked me to maintain and I maintained it, she backed me up. I have in the past had positions that weren't like that, where something would move up to the boss and they would cave in and expect you to hold the line all the time, but it gets to them and they have absolutely no boundaries or rules. And that is the worst feeling in the world. That is also the feeling our clients get when they find out that we've done something differently for them than we did for somebody else. Or we enforced a rule with them that we didn't enforce with other people. In my industry, that comes down to pricing a lot. So if I tell one client digital files are one price, and then I tell somebody else it's a different price, I have now lost the trust of both people, and they will find out. And it's that same awful feeling of, why didn't you back me up? Why didn't you support me? Why can't I trust you? And this is a trust issue. So if you're having a hard time with your boundaries, remember that boundaries are what keeps a relationship going well. And boundaries are about not just the person who's in front of you who has a problem. It is the 10 or 15 people before them that respected that boundary. Like when I have a boss who doesn't back me up and is basically then allows me to get trampled all over because they didn't want to have a spine. It's the worst feeling, and you lose trust. So having trust preserves relationships, and it preserves relationships not just with the person that you're having a conflict with. It's really important to see it again in terms of that larger picture. The very last one, and this is the one that inspired this week's blog post. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about how boundaries prevent burnout. And I've got a blog post coming up about it. We'll have our podcast will be about that this week. We're actually interviewing my coach who has helped me establish all of these boundaries. Hopefully she will be sharing her wisdom with you as well. So this last bullet point, I could have gone off on this for 4 pages and 3 businesses, but boundaries prevent burnout. So like my friendship in the beginning where I kept giving and giving and giving, not because she asked me to, but because I wanted to. And then that desire became an expectation. And then that expectation wasn't enough. And I wasn't getting the things I needed out of it, like gratitude. And it just kept adding up and adding up. And instead of saying like, hey, this is my boundary and I should have told you earlier, it ruined a friendship because I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I think literally one day I just stopped talking because, 9th grade. So boundaries prevent burnout. If you are constantly pissed off and exhausted by your clients, you don't have the boundaries in place that you need. If you're constantly in conflict with your clients, you need better boundaries. If you are constantly in conflict with your process, with your rules being broken through your process, you need more concrete rules that are communicated better. Boundaries prevent burnout. Brene Brown says that clear is kind. I've always had a hard time with that because I feel like sometimes I want to soften what I say to people, especially personally. I've gone a long way with this in business, but it's different personally. And I will sometimes hear myself in my head saying no, and out of my mouth comes yes. I don't know what switch is not going there because I want them to like me and because I want to have a close relationship with them. But what happens over time is I burn out and it impacts the entire relationship, if not hurting it completely. If you don't build boundaries around your business, you will burn out. You will lose your business, or at the very least, you will lose what you love about your business. And then it becomes a chore and a bad relationship that you have to keep up with. So boundaries prevent burnout. So when you're feeling burnt out, if you're on this call and you're just stagnant or still and burnt out and overwhelmed, just remember that you have the opportunity now to reset your boundaries. And it is going to be uncomfortable the first year that you do it. It is very uncomfortable, but it is only going to get easier. And I promise you, it will allow you to fall back in love with your business and back in love with why you came to this in the first place. Okay, that is the big topic for me today. Boundaries prevent burnout. So I want to hear from you guys. Any thoughts you've had about this, any questions you've had about this, go ahead and type them over here. I see some comments I'm going to speak to in a second. While you guys are typing that out, if you have any questions or feedback about boundaries or something that you remember from our talk today or in the past, go ahead and type that in the comments for me. By the way, those comments help this broadcast get seen. It tells Facebook this is good quality content. So if you find this to be good quality content, that only helps me. Let me tell you about a couple of things we have coming up while people are typing that. We will be doing, just for photographers, sorry my other people, my photographers, we will be doing the royal we. I will be teaching a workshop for a week every day from 12 to 1:30, and we're covering different topics every single day. It is just $49 for the whole week. So you get a week of hour-and-a-half long classes, all live. Here are the topics that we're going to do. We're going to start on Monday with going from digitally inclusive to in-person sales. Tuesday, we're going to do how to do a sales meeting in a client's home or in their Zoom. Wednesday, we're going to talk about how to have the courage and the mindset you need to make business changes. Thursday, sales psychology and the rules that you can follow in sales that guide the sales process and keep everybody feeling their best. And the last is what to do first, next, and after that. So these classes are really for anybody who is just starting out or is feeling stuck. It is more likely that you are feeling stuck. And hopefully this price point is delicious enough for you guys that even if you really just need one of those topics and really can only come in for that one, it's of tremendous value for you. Okay, so let's see what Gail says over here. I find it difficult when people do not like my boundaries. People just don't like boundaries in general. And when mine may be different than theirs in my industry. For example, like you, that means pricing in digital files when many in our industry are giving them away. Yeah, people don't like boundaries. That's what sucks about this, is nobody enjoys boundaries. In fact, it's just like what happened with Cece with the popsicle, right? So she asked for a popsicle, I say no. She doesn't just go, okay, mother, I understand your reasoning, and I know you have my best interest at heart. No, she throws an ever-loving fit every day, a full freak out. And sometimes it's crying, and sometimes it's I don't know, grumbling under her breath, which is, I don't know where she got that from. But sometimes she grumbles under her breath and thinks that we can't hear it, but we can. And sometimes I just invite her to have her big feelings in another room. It doesn't mean she responds any differently. That visceral reaction, we all have emotional reactions to people setting boundaries. That first reaction, they're going to tell you who they are and what they're really thinking in that first reaction. And that's where you get to decide, does this person get to trespass on my boundaries or not? Is this asserting this boundary bringing me closer to where I want to be long term? So Gail, I know you have boundaries about, what's included versus what's not included, and you have those boundaries because you want to exist long term and you want to run a profitable and sustainable business, even if it's not what is industry standard in our business now, which I could spend an hour on that, but it's okay, because the people who do come to you are going to absolutely adore you for having those boundaries. And just like the boss, people will know that you are going to be consistent with them. And that consistency is what's really difficult when we first start to change, because we kind of want to be a little bit of both. And Sarah says, hard to have boundaries when you're just starting out and you need every client who walks through the door. It's hard at the beginning to weed out clients that will bring you down. Oh, yes. I am so glad you said this, because this will segue us into the following 2 weeks conversation. But she's absolutely right. Sarah is saying, hey, how do you do this? How do you get selective and have boundaries and set up all these rules when you're new into business? I consider year one to be like spare tire emergency mode. So if you're freaking out, if you need to keep your business propped up, you are going to push your boundaries. I wouldn't say push your values should stay the same, but perhaps you're going to say yes to things that you wouldn't have otherwise said yes to, or at a price point you would not otherwise agree to get the job. That is a spare tire emergency situation. Throw the spare tire on the car, get to the auto shop, get to the next place, get to that bill being paid, and then continue to grow from that place. So you can't stay on a spare tire, and you certainly can't go more than 40 miles an hour on one, and you can't keep it on your car for forever. So it's only for a limited amount of time, but I allow that caveat. Everybody knows for themselves when this time frame is, when you're really in an emergency situation. I can't tell everybody what that might be for you, but you know it when you're in it. So throw the spare tire on. Just know that you can't keep applying the spare tire and get where you want to go, and you certainly can't get there quickly. And eventually you have to take the spare tire off. So don't build an entire business around having no boundaries. Make it your exception, and then continue to build the business that is going to grow and be where you want it to be. Oh, look at that, with 2 minutes to spare, y'all. So thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm so glad you guys have shown up. It means the world to me that you guys have been so consistent, that you have been inviting people to the group. The more people you can bring to the group, the better. I see a lot of you guys actually have invited folks. Keep inviting them. If they don't fill out the questions when they sign up, I won't let them through, just because I don't want this to become a big spammy group. So I would rather keep our numbers tight and grow slowly and more intentionally. But if there's somebody that you know of that's big-hearted, that needs help sounding boundaries, please feel free to invite them to our group, or have them reach out to me. Are We Love Business Church? Oh, I'm so glad. So you guys come on to the program. We will be posting a podcast. The blog post is already up. If you want a sneak peek, it's on teresaporter.com. I haven't publicized it yet, but I will. All of this information is there. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about this topic, having a big heart and having boundaries. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. By the way, if someone wanted to post in like Networking Women of the Triangle or Apex Carry Moms or something and say, Teresa's here and she's not an asshole, and she'll teach you how to not raise assholes, that would be awesome. You guys have a great rest of your day. If you have anything or if you need anything from me, post it in the group. I'll be happy to respond. If you're just tuning in now, do #rewatch so I know that you guys have just arrived. All right. Thanks for coming to Business Church today. Hey, man. All right. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Bye.